Welcome to The Ladder, a weekly dose of personal development ideas to help spark your imagination, increase your leadership skills, and bring more success into your life. And now, here's your host, James Ferris.
Well, hello and welcome to our very first episode of The Ladder. I'm your host, James Ferris, and we're going to have some fun here together, and hopefully both of us will learn a few things. One of the things that I want to start with is that when one teaches, two learn. And I think that's going to be the same thing that happens here in this podcast, is I will be teaching principles, but really I'm going to be the one learning just as much, if not more, than anybody listening to this podcast. Understand that a lot of this podcast, the purpose of this podcast is to help enrich your life and bring more leadership and personal development into your life, but actually it's more about bringing those things into my own life. So the things that I'm going to talk to you about over the course of our time together are only going to be things that I have learned, but also things that I need to improve upon myself. So keep that in mind as I go about whatever I'm going to say. Some of the things that I say to you will be scripted, and other things will be unscripted, depending upon a variety of things, of course. But I wanted to start our first podcast off with this particular subject of leadership, because really, in the world of personal development, that's what it all comes down to, is becoming a better leader. And the first person that we have to learn to lead is, of course, ourselves. So unless we can lead ourselves, it's very difficult to lead other people. And one of my mentors very early on said it like this. He said that if you look behind you and people are following you, you're a leader. But if you look behind you and nobody's following you, you're just out simply taking a walk. And so that's what I want to try to avoid having happen in your life or in my life, is to be simply out taking a walk. We want to become better versions of ourselves so that we can become better leaders to help other people become better versions of themselves. And when you become a better version of yourself, you attract a different kind of people to you, or a different kind of person to you. Your brain begins operating on a different wavelength, and we basically send out a message or a wavelength out to the world, and if the other people are tuned into the proper frequency, in other words, they're operating on a frequency similar to ours, and in this case it's personal development, then I believe that we're going to attract a better quality of person to us. So that's the idea here, is to start to think in a little bit different, to think in a little bit of a different way. I'm trying to think of a better word, a more collegiate word than that, but I don't think we need one here. We just need to learn to think in a better way and start operating on a higher frequency and expect more from ourselves. When we expect more from ourselves, other people will pick up on that, and they will be inspired by our actions. So there are a lot of little cliches that we're going to be investigating and studying over the course of our time together. And I find that cliches they're there for a reason. They're basically a cliche that it's made to sound like a negative thing, like it's played out or something. But I have found that in cliches there lies true wisdom. There's a reason why certain phrases continually get repeated over the ages, because there's a lot of truth to them. There's a lot of truth to them. And if we pay attention to some of these things that have been passed down by our parents or our grandparents and maybe even their grandparents and some of our forefathers, people that came way before us and maybe are no longer here with us, I think that we are going to find a lot of truth in those things that will apply here and today. So this is the start of a brand new year. It's 2018 now, and boy, what a ride 2017 was. I'm not sure what your year was like, but my year 2017 was incredible. So in 1 year's time, I went from semi-retired to fully employed again in the same year, and I had to really start over again. And so the thing to learn about that, or learn from that, is that we're meant to be in motion. Our bodies are meant to be in motion. Our minds are meant to be in motion. This entire universe is strictly a bunch of molecules that are continually in motion, and that's why people talk about the the concept of our lives being kind of like a computer simulation, and nothing is really as real as it seems, and that really everything that we see around us is just a matter of light reflection and other crazy things like this. But there's a lot of truth to that as well. That doesn't mean that if I grab this microphone I can't feel it, because of course I can feel it. But if you were to analyze it underneath a microscope, what we would find is that there are very, very small, tightly knit molecules moving very rapidly. And we're in a constant state of change. The entire universe around us is in a constant state of change. There are parts of the universe that are growing and parts of the universe that are dying. And there's nothing really staying the same, no matter what we're looking at or what we're talking about. So, in speaking of universes, if you were to look up in the sky in the wee hours of the morning, you'll see what they call stars. And according to people that are much wiser than I, these stars that we see are basically planets and asteroids and things that have burned out a long time ago, but their light lingers on. Let that sink in for a second. They've burned out a long time ago. The planets in some cases were destroyed, but the light that they gave off is still going through the universe. It's still making its way through the universe until it gets to our universe. And of course we know these by constellations, and the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper and Orion's Belt and other things like this. So there's a lot of really cool things that we can draw from that. And I just gave you kind of something to really think about, and hopefully you'll take the time to really do that. That's my mission with this podcast. It's all about personal development, leadership, and success. And my goal for you is to really get you to think on a different wavelength than maybe you've ever thought before. I'm going to come at you with certain analogies and metaphors and soliloquies and other things that really maybe you've never heard anybody say before. And that's my goal. I think that I think on a much deeper wavelength than a lot of people that I know. I'm not saying that as a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that it is a thing. I think about things from a different perspective than probably most other people do. And I'm a person that believes that there's good in this world, and there's good in people, and we're inherently good, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some bad in our world as well, because there certainly is. But our mission, my mission, is to try and become one of the beacons in our society, one of the good people that people can come to for good information. And, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I'm telling you, I've made absolutely. I've made more mistakes in my life than I have had successes. But it's those mistakes that I've made that have helped to lead to my successes. So if somebody has had problems with something in the past, and they've overcome those things, let's say a person that smokes for most of their life, for instance, which I'm not a smoker, but if somebody smoked for 20 or 30 years of their life, and they concocted some form of cancer, let's say throat cancer, for instance, and they had to have their vocal cords removed, and they had throat cancer and had things removed, and now they can no longer talk unless they use one of those little vibrating machines that you can hear their voice, but it doesn't have any of their former vocal qualities to it. See, I believe that person, the one that smoked for most of their life and made the big mistakes and found out the hard way that smoking was bad for them, I think they've got they're going to have much more impact on getting others to look at smoking and thinking about it in a different perspective and saying, hey, maybe there is something to what this person's saying, as opposed to somebody giving the very same message who has never smoked in their lives. So that because the person who's never smoked in their lives doesn't really know what it's like to have an addiction like nicotine, doesn't know what it's like to crave that nicotine in moments of stress to calm themselves, or to be able to fit in with a group that everybody else smoked in. But somebody who's done that, they have experiences that the other person hasn't. And a lot of those experiences are coming from mistakes. So there's another saying, another cliche, and I'm going to probably paraphrase it here because I'm not sure I'm going to get it exactly right, but it's this, that good judgment comes from a lot of bad judgment first. Good judgment comes from a lot of bad judgment at first, meaning a lot of bad experiences that people have created the ability for them to now have good judgment. And so that's really the whole key right there, to understand that if you've made some mistakes in your past, God knows I've made my fair share of mistakes, and I will probably make many, many, many more mistakes in my life as well. But that doesn't mean that you don't have something to offer to yourself or to other people. It doesn't mean that you don't have value in this world, because you do. All right? Keep that in mind. You're going to make mistakes. There's nobody perfect. And here's the thing for you to do right now. I want you to actually do this with me. Take your hand and point a finger. Just point your finger anywhere you'd like to. Point your finger at an object in front of you right now. Are you doing this with me? Okay, look at your finger now. You're pointing at an object, or maybe you're pointing at a person, or maybe you're pointing at a picture. Now, what you may not have realized is if you look very closely at your hand, you're going to find that your index finger is pointing at something. But there are 3 other fingers that are left on your hand, your middle finger, your ring finger, and your pinky finger, all pointing back at you. And see, what I want you to think about and remember with this particular idea is that anytime somebody points a finger at you and says, you're not qualified to talk about this subject, you're not qualified to teach on this particular subject because of the mistakes you've made in your past, this is what you need to keep in mind. They're pointing a finger at you without realizing that there's 3 fingers pointing back at them. And whether you're Christian or not, or religious or not, or spiritual or not, here's one of the things that I really believe from the Bible, and that is that you judge not unless you want to be judged yourself. And there's the other saying, something along the lines of, don't look at the speck in your or don't talk about the speck in your neighbor's eye until you notice the log in your own eye, which is they basically say the same thing, and that is that none of us are perfect. We're all on a journey of self-discovery and hopefully self-improvement. And I can promise, if you're listening to this podcast right now, you are one of those people. You're on a mission of self-discovery and on a mission of personal development. Now, there are some people in this world that they're not on a mission of self-improvement, and so they would probably never tune into something like this. But you did. You did. And that's the thing to keep in mind about yourself, is at least you're trying, right? We don't become failures until we stop trying. And that holds true in any area of our lives, especially becoming better people. We can all become better people. What's the biggest room in the world? The room for improvement. See, there's another cliche I just threw at you, and there are many, many more where those came from. Well, we've reached the end of our very first podcast. This is The Ladder. I'm James Theris, and I would like to wish you the very best year of your entire life. Here's to 2018, and you and I climbing this ladder together. I'll talk to you next week.